Andrew, you're a YouTuber, but you're also an ex-BBC man. So you've kind of straddled both of these worlds. It seems as if, every day there's a new accusation of BBC bias. I mean, we were talking in the previous pod about the BBC's problems with, antisemitism and things like that. Are people just, people have clearly just lost faith in the old media. What have you seen on the inside that gives a reason for that?
I think, okay, so firstly, I exaggerate my BBC links
That's
because
good
I
to get out there. Yeah.
get that out there. I know I'm always honest about that when someone asks me about it, but I like saying like fallen BBC journalist. That's my Twitter, fallen, because it sort of implies I'm demonic. And then I've got a podcast called Heretics, and it's all kind of
it works. It's nice.
yeah. So there you go. But I sold a documentary to them, so I worked with them for a brief period of time. Firstly, trying to make it with them. They then didn't want me, so I went and made it anyway. And then I spent 2 years pushing them to take it. They treated me terribly. The whole thing was horrible. And the people there, I did get a good insight into, I think, why it's doomed to fail. It's not entirely their fault, actually. I think there's that, the bus stop test. The bus stop test is like whether a country has a united culture. And the bus stop test, can you go to a bus stop and the person sat next to you, you can say, hey, what do you think about that game last night? What do you think about that TV show, Michael McIntyre's Big Show? Hey, what do you think? I think it's, quite obvious to anyone listening, to any of us, we would fail that bus test today. Go down to the bus stop and say like, yeah, you're not gonna have anything in common with anyone. So how can you have a state-linked or state-backed in some way, I don't know, broadcaster that is supposed to represent the interests of everybody when everybody is so fractured in our multicultural society? So again, I think it is an issue to do with multiculturalism. It's utterly different. I've got some lovely people who live in my neighborhood, really, really nice people from different places. Not everything is that horrible Islam stuff. Some people are just lovely, lovely families, but they don't have a clue if I ask them about, the things I'm watching on TV, or, I can't just ask them about Would I Lie to You and David Mitchell. They don't know who that is. They're living in a parallel world right now. So again, BBC cannot possibly represent that. So I think that's one huge part of the problem. Okay, yes, they could start putting out more of the stuff that we think is right. Well, then, people who are a bit more on the left or the progressive side would also then feel, well, hang on, we're not happy with it. So eventually it can't work for everyone. The other thing is just, again, cults, really. You've got an organization here full of just a tiered organization full of tens and tens of thousands of people around the world, but predominantly in London offices. Everybody absolutely desperate not to lose their jobs. Everybody desperate to toe the line. And I don't think it's necessarily a thought that's in their mind, oh, I can't say that because I'll get fired. I think it's a very slow kind of bureaucracy and authoritarianism that gradually seeps in, and you say, that guy's my boss and he thinks that, so I should think it as well. I suppose I think it as well. And you just become more and more and more careful, which is why it was a shock the other day. BBC put out that expose, what was it, of migrants faking being gay.
There was one about faking being gay. They've done another on faking domestic violence. They've done one on the lawyers that have they've done some really good exposés, but as you say, lots of people have been complaining about it because they're like, well, BBC's just become the bloody Sun or whatever, doing the Farage line. There are people who genuinely think that Farage is a creation of the BBC, and it's only thanks to their relentless promotion of the man and its policies.
Were it not for Question Time, Brexit would never have happened. It was the sort of the alternative theory.
Even though they put him on as the idiot, don't they, as the guy to have a go at. So it's just completely impossible. And so in this fractured society, it's no surprise that at the same time individual YouTubers have risen, but obviously you get the opposite problem. And I try to ward against it, or plan against this or whatever, but it's really, really hard. The opposite problem. This time I don't have anyone around me to go like, oh, what do you think? Well, I don't know what I think. So I can just say whatever the hell I want. And yes, I'll get a reaction from my audience. Well, my audience might want to push me in a certain direction. They might want me to be further to the right. I found that to be the case, actually, when I had this debate with Steve Laws about Homeland. a huge part of my audience, although actually percentage-wise probably very small, but a very vocal
Yeah.
minority, were very angry with me and wanted me to be further kind of what I would call woke right.
Which, considering the substance of that conversation, Steve Laws, and people I'm sure will know, is the total remigration guy. Basically wants to deport anyone who isn't white British, I think, more or less. Yeah, I think he said in your interview he'd settle for 98% or whatever.
Because he's
But
98%.
yeah,
That's
Exactly.
the exact. So he says anyway.
Yeah.
Self-interest.
I
Yeah.
love the idea that they wanted you to embrace his position, because his position was that you yourself should be deported, which would be a bit of an ask.
I know. I've even this morning I've had a few anonymous people, just not the troll, but like sort of people who think they're reasonable but anonymous, and saying to me, "Oh, well, I used to love your show. I stopped watching you after that one because you just called him anti-Semitic." And I was like, "Well, yeah, but if he's telling me to leave the country because I'm Jewish, I don't know." I'm not sure. Like, I hate being, like I said earlier, I don't want to be the victim going, "Oh, I hate that whiny." There's a whiny aspect, there's a whiny fringe of Jewish community, every community, going, "Oh God, everyone's having a go." And I don't think it's, even if it's right, I don't think it's helpful. I think it just pisses people off. So I don't want to be. I want to be. No, we're going to fight against this. Let's be strong. Let's be, a bit. It's a bit controversial to say now, but I would have said maybe before October 7th, be a bit more Israeli about this. The Israeli Jews, the idea, I think it was Ben Gurion who said it, or the founding, might have got that completely wrong. Founding, I don't know much about Israel, but I remember he was saying, like, we want Jews to be bus drivers and cleaners and so on, and that was the idea of Israel, instead of this kind of Woody Allen class, which is, again, an exaggeration. There's a lot of working class manual labor Jewish people, but probably not so many as in other minorities. But that was the point of Israel. And sometimes be a bit more, a bit more robust, not this kind of thing.
But the anti-Semitism was, you got to call it out when it's that clear cut, because that's one thing I think, because the labels get so overused, or at least the victimhood move gets so overused sometimes, and certainly other areas of the racism discussion, it becomes something that, whether it's even the anti-Israel left or the sort of woke right, for lack of a better phrase, they hide behind that. But in the response you got from the Steve Laws thing, I mean, at one point I just did what I thought was a pretty straightforward defense of you, and everyone decided that I was Jewish and I was going to be deported. I remember you responded saying something about Spurs, who we're both unfortunately fans of at the moment, truly persecuted group, Spurs supporters at this point, and they were like, "Well, of course you're both Spurs supporters." So it was like this, they gave me a Jewish surname for a bit. That was good. It was quite entertaining seeing that unfurl for a little while.
Well, I mean, my dad was Goldstein. He changed it because of anti-Semitism, and as part of like a desire to assimilate more to this country. We grew up English. Every now and then there would be a kind of, "Oh, it's Passover, we'll go to my aunt and uncle's house," and we sort of joke about the silly thing. But I had a bar mitzvah as well. But almost, if I look, 99.999% was just the same as every other English. My school was not a Jewish school or anything like that. It was a posh school though. That was then used against us. Goldstein's like, no, but this is the assimilation. That's what we're trying to do. That's why I think would be, if one of the biggest concerns I have at the moment is that, like, black people, for example, in this country who maybe came from a different wherever, they used to call their kids like John and names like that. All the footballers were called, like, every footballer was called John Barnes. I don't know why. They were all John Barnes and Ian Wright. And now, it's just names that are clearly African. Like, be proud of those cultures, but it's a worrying trend that is part of multiculturalism, again, towards that. I mean, if there's ever a greater sign of where you really feel is your home, it's what you name your children and your desire to assimilate. So when they were calling them John and Ian and so on, I think that was, great. And it doesn't mean they all have to do that, but now there's been a huge movement away from that. My family wanted to be British. That's all we are. My name's Andrew. My brother's Michael. It wasn't Goldstein, it's Gold. We want to be that. And unfortunately, but I get your point as well. Look, you got to call things out. I like how people like Josh Howie do it. Josh Howie's, because he jokes, he laughs at them, he shows them how ridiculous they are.
I think that's important as well, because it's quite clear that just sort of calling it out or just pointing it out is insufficient. Not
And
least
being pearl clutching as well.
You got to get,
you lose often by doing it.
Yeah, you got to kind of get. You got to get into the gut with them a bit, but I think that's fine, because a lot of them are ridiculous and embarrassing people, who are, a lot of their hatreds and warped views of the world are shaped by that. And so, pointing that out is probably necessary, because it's just totally insufficient, especially particularly with the rise of the kind of Fuentes tendency to just be like, "Oh, what you said is horrible." Well, of course it is, but that doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, Piers tried that.
Exactly.
That's racist. Yeah, racist. I'm a racist. I don't care. Like,
just rip the piss out of them, I think is big part of the question.